Bruchim Aboyim, again, welcome to our home. Thank you for attending. So this week on My Thoughts, we will continue with our in-depth examination of Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, with the 18th Mishnah in this chapter. Now, this Mishnah concludes the first chapter, again, of Pirkei Avot. It was authored by Reb Shimon ben Gamliel II. He was from the third generation of Tanoim and president of the Great Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Supreme Court. He was the son of Rabbi Gamliel II and the father of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who was also known as Rebbe. Rebbe is credited with editing the Mishnah, the first of the oral tradition to be put into writing. He was the Nasi after the destruction of the Second Temple and the exile that followed. He understood firsthand the plight of a nation that had been fractured. This Mishnah is not an afterthought, but rather a summation. It is leadership led by wisdom forged in crisis. It speaks to a generation emerging from destruction, confusion, and exile. It's not idealistic Torah. What it is rather Torah in survival mode. One of the most famous rulings that he gave was that the welfare of the community takes precedence over the rights and interests of the individual. In addition, he declared that one need not erect monuments to honor the pious. Their deeds, teachings, and writings will better preserve their memory. Now, his opinion is recorded more than 100 times in the Mishnah, and in addition, he is quoted even more extensively in the Braitos and the Tosefta. He was best known for his exceptional humility. So the Mishnah states, Al Shloshes Devorim Ha'olam Kayim, that the world stands on three principles. They are Al Hadin, on justice, the Al Ha'emes, truth, and the Al Shalom, and peace. As it states in the book of Zechariah, you shall adjudicate the verdict of truth and peace at all your gates. Reb Shimon Gamliel teaches a principle that is not merely ethical, but existential. The Mishnah does not describe ideals that embellish the world. It identifies the structural pillars that allow the world to endure. Justice, truth, and peace are load-bearing forces in the world. Remove even one, and both society and the inner world of human existence begin to collapse. In the second Mishnah in this chapter, Shimon HaTzadik taught us that the world Omed stands on three principles. They are Torah, Avoda, again prayer, and Gemilas Chasadim, kindness. The Morale of Prague explains that those three ideals constitute the purpose of the world's coming into being, while Din, Emet, and Shalom, and this Mishnah of justice, truth, and peace, sustain human civilization itself. Now, without Torah, the world has no soul. Without justice, truth, and peace, society cannot exist long enough to receive a soul. Rabbeinu Yonah states that the difference between these two statements, the world was created for the realization of the three principles that Shimon HaTzadik advocated. However, without justice, truth, and peace, the kiyum, the continued existence of the world, is in jeopardy. As stated by the Bartanura, Shimon HaTzadik is telling us why God created the world. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is enlightening us on God's plan for us to be partners with him in developing his world so that it can continue to flourish. You know, the third day of creation was the day that God Almighty repeated the word tov, good, twice. The verse in Genesis states, and God said, let the earth bring forth desha, grass. The Hebrew word desha is spelled Dalet Shin Aleph, which is an acronym for these three things, Din, Shalom, and Emet, justice, peace, and truth. This would seem to testify that for the world to survive in a godly fashion, it would require these three pillars to flourish, much like the grass of the field. Together, these six qualities complement each other. In order for Torah to exist, its conclusion must be in accordance with law, justice. Our avoda, prayers, must be sincere, clothed in truth, and halachically correct. They must also be connected to acts of kindness and brotherly love, so that we can bring shalom, peace, to the world. He states that din, justice, represents structure, responsibility, and accountability. He explains that din provides form, since without form, even kindness can become destructive. Justice is not cruelty, it is clarity. The Rambam, Maimonides, teaches us that judgment is a divine act. A judge must imagine that the Shekhinah, the divinity of God, is standing before him, which is why the Torah refers to an honest judge with the name Elokim, God's name of judgment. Din restrains chaos, but when isolated, it can become cruel, and that is why din alone, judgment alone, cannot sustain the world. Me'am Loe states that justice depends on the judge, truth depends on the witnesses, and peace depends on the litigants accepting the verdict in a positive manner. Our sages tell us that when a judge adjudicates properly, well, he becomes a partner with God in creation. We witness in the Torah that the flood was brought upon the world only because justice no longer existed. The Avnei Ezel taught that in the Gentile world there is a separation between church and state. Civil laws are made only for the welfare of the state. In Judaism, just like sacrifices are the worship of God in the temple, so too, civil laws are the worship of God in our daily lives. Emet, truth, is the inner alignment with the divine purpose. The Medrash teaches us that when God created the world, interestingly enough, truth opposed the creation of man. It stated that humanity is prone to falsehood. Thereby, God cast truth to the ground, teaching that human truth must be cultivated. The Maharal of Prague explains that emet is not mere factual accuracy, but rather harmony between intention, speech, and action. A chassid once approached the Rebbe in anguish. He said, "Rebbe, I speak truth wherever I go, yet somehow I leave conflict behind me." The Rebbe listened quietly and replied, "Truth spoken without compassion is not truth. It's not emet. It is din, judgment wearing the wrong clothing." The Rebbe explained that justice, truth, and peace are not sequential virtues. They must present simultaneously. Emphasis on one at the expense of the other two, and the world tilts on its axis. However, when all three walk together as one, then the Shekhinah, the divinity of God, rests among us. The Magen Avot states that the Hebrew word emet, truth, is spelled aleph, mem, taf. All of these letters are separated as the first, middle, and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. They all rest on 2 feet, allowing them to stand firmly on their own. Whereas the Hebrew letters for the word sheker, meaning falsehood, are spelled shin, kuf, resh. These are the last 3 of the last 4 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. They rest only on one leg, which makes them unstable and easily toppled. The Zohar taught us that sheker ein lo raglayim, that falsehood has no feet. It states in the portion of Mishpatim that bidvar sheker tirchak, from anything false, distance yourself. The Haksavi HaKabbalah questions as to why this negative commandment, interestingly enough, is phrased as if it were a positive commandment. It just should have said, "Do not tell a lie." He answers, to impress upon us that because this sin is so common, that we should take additional precautions against becoming guilty of transgressing it. So, tirchak, distance yourself. Stay away from situations that might cause you to lie. In addition, I find it interesting that the last 2 letters in the word emet spell out the Hebrew word mace, which means death. However, when we add an aleph to the beginning of the word, an allusion to God, it then becomes emet, truth. I believe that this is an indication that if a person wants to be protected from death, he should always put the service of God first in his mind and actions, and that is truth. Now, shalom, peace, is not compromise, but integration. The Talmud Yerushalmi states that peace is the vessel that contains within it all the blessings. Without peace, justice destroys, and truth wounds. The Rambam notes that one of God's names is Shalom, for peace reveals divine unity within a world of multiplicity. Now, these three concepts form a triangle. Din, judgment, provides boundaries. Emet, truth, provides balance. And Shalom, peace, provides continuity. Remove one, and the whole structure collapses. The Zohar connects these concepts to the central Sephiric structure. Din, judgment, corresponds to the sphera of Gevura, discipline. Emet, truth, to the sphera of Tiferet, beauty. And Shalom, peace, to the sphera of Yesod, foundation. The Arizal explains that Tiferet harmonizes Gevura, and Yesod channels that harmony into lived reality. Peace is therefore the result, not the starting point. Now, false speech is condemned by the Zohar as Shalom Sheker, peace that avoids truth and postpones justice. True speech emerges only after honest judgment, refined through compassion. The Holy Baal Shem Tov taught that truth spoken without love, ceases to be truth, and peace pursued without truth ceases to be peace. He stated that peace begins within. A person who is fractured internally projects conflict outwardly. Inner harmony naturally radiates outward and consequently draws peace into the world. The Kotzker Rebbe sharpened this concept even further. He said, people love truth in theory, but flee from it in practice. Because real truth depends and demands self-judgment. The Zohar refers to Emet, truth, as the seal of the Holy One, blessed be He. Truth is not only factual accuracy, it is integrity, but only when thought, speech, and action reflect one another. The Alter Rebbe teaches us that falsehood fractures the soul. Living a lie forces a person into inner division. Truth, even when painful, restores inner coherence and spiritual stability. This can best be understood through a story. There was once a small town divided by a bitter disagreement. What it began over, somehow no one clearly remembered anymore. Some said it was about money, others said it was about honor, while others thought it was about a careless word spoken years earlier. What everyone knew for certain was that neighbors no longer greeted one another, families crossed the street to avoid each other, and somehow the air itself felt tense, as though the town were holding its breath. Now, at the center of the conflict were two well-respected men. Both were learned, both sincere. Both were convinced that truth stood firmly on their side. Now, each gathered followers, each quoted Talmudic sources, each spoke passionately about justice. Slowly the town began to unravel. A poor man stopped receiving assistance because he belonged to the wrong side. A wedding felt incomplete because relatives would not sit in the same room together. Even prayer felt fractured, as though the words rose upward and isolated. They could not join together. So one day a distinguished elderly rabbi arrived in the town. He did not speak publicly. He did not call public meetings. He simply sat in the back of the study hall and he listened. After some days, the two leaders approached him together. They said, Rabbi, we both seek peace, but not at the cost of truth. What should we do? The old rabbi looked at them with gentle eyes. He replied, tell me, What is it that holds the world together? Well, in unison they answered, truth, justice, and law. The rabbi nodded. All of these are pillars, but pillars alone do not make a home livable. He then told them a story. There was a stone bridge held up by 3 great supports. As long as they stood, the bridge did not collapse. But if the stones are cold and sharp, people will be afraid to cross over it. The bridge may stand, but life will not pass over it. He leaned forward. He said, the world stands on justice, truth, and peace. But peace is not the absence of disagreement. Peace is the willingness to protect the world even when truth feels endangered. Well, both men fell silent. The rabbi continued, truth without peace becomes a weapon. Justice without peace becomes cruelty. When peace is broken, the world itself trembles, even if everyone is technically right. That night, one of the men went to the other's home. He stood at the door for a long time before he managed to muster up the courage to knock. When the door opened, he said only one sentence. He said, I may still disagree with you, but I refuse to let the world break because of it. Well, tears filled the other man's eyes. They did not resolve all of their differences at once. Some arguments still remained. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. But greetings returned. Help was given again to the needy without conditions. Prayer once again occupied its proper seat in the synagogue, and the people began to feel whole once again. Now the elderly rabbi left quietly a few days later. When asked what he had taught the town, someone answered, he reminded us that the world doesn't need us to win. It just needs us to hold it together. And so Mishnah 18 lived. I find it interesting that the gematria, numerical value of the word emet, truth, is 441. If you add 4 plus 1, coming across, it equals 9. Multiply any number by 9, and it always comes back to 9. 2 times 9 is 18, 1 and 8 is 9, 3 times 9 is 27, 2 and 7 is 9. Take it as far as you want. It'll always come back to 9. Truth always remains true. I believe that the order of these 3 pillars mentioned in this Mishnah, with truth in the middle, is not a random choice. Since neither justice nor peace can exist without truth. The gematria, the numerical value of the word din, judgment, is 64. The gematria, the numerical value of the word shalom, peace, is 376. Together, they equal 440. If one adds God, alluded to by the Hebrew letter aleph, 1, to these words, then the 2 equal 441, the gematria of the word emet, truth. Bottom line, this Mishnah teaches us not to choose which value we prefer, but rather to become vessels capable of holding justice, truth, and peace together in harmony. In doing so, we do not merely improve the world, we allow it to stand and flourish. The world stands on justice, on truth, and on peace. Not because we always succeed, but because we are always responsible. When peace is chosen, heaven and earth remain connected. When peace is protected, truth becomes a guiding light rather than a destructive fire. When peace is restored, even quietly, the world continues to stand, one softened heart at a time. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel teaches us that the world does not stand on passion or charisma. It stands on principles lived with humility. Justice tempered by truth, peace upheld by truth. When these 3 pillars stand together, well, the world stands resolute and upright. I hope you have found this lecture interesting and informative. May God Almighty bless you with the strength and wisdom to follow the advice of the sages. Next week, God willing, we'll continue with the first Mishnah in the second chapter of Pirkei Avot. But meanwhile, let us continue to pray for a swift and complete victorious end to the war in the Middle East, with the total annihilation of Iran and all of her proxies. Let us celebrate again the return of all of our hostages. May God Almighty cure the sick and injured, comfort all the mourners, and return home all the brave IDF soldiers led by Mashiach Tzidkenu, and let it be quickly and in our time. Again, I want to thank you for listening. I know there's a lot here. Hopefully it's made a difference. And if not, listen to it again. Sometimes a lecture one time isn't enough. It's very easy. It should not go one ear out the other. It's something that needs to reside within you. It has to be transformative. Again, if you're able to, please push the like button, subscribe, and by all means, do the world a favor. Share it with your friends. Let's make the world a better place, and hopefully bring Mashiach now. God bless, be well, Shabbat Shalom, and again, thank you for listening.